The first few weeks of April 1999 were a busy time for police in Adelaide. One of the biggest events on the car racing calendar was on, and thousands of people from around Australia flocked to the capital. As crowds began to dwindle, two police officers hoped their shift would be a little more routine. But it wasn't to be.
The patrol officers found a note on the windscreen, and this note directed them to the Old Paynham police station, and that they may find the body of a woman there, and that it was no joke. They immediately went down, and in the bushes they did in fact find the body of a young woman. It looked like the body had been there for some time because it was in an advanced state of decomposition.
Tonight, a body dumped at an old police station but unnoticed for days.
The grisly discovery was made just before 11 last night. The woman's badly decomposed body was partially hidden by bushes in the front yard of the old station. Police say she'd been murdered.
Because of the arrangement of the clothing, her jeans had been pulled down and her panties had also been removed. There was a distinct suggestion that there had been some sexual offence committed prior to her death.
When you go to a scene, basically what the investigating police want to know is the manner of death. And when I looked at that case, it was immediately apparent that it was a homicide they were dealing with. It was a sexual assault homicide from behind. And the reason I say that is the upper clothing that remained on the body included a quilted shirt, and the quilted shirt had been twisted tightly around the neck. And that indicated that the cause of death was strangulation by her own clothing, strangulation by ligature.
Apart from how she died, police needed answers to two other important questions: who the victim was, and could they get any estimate on when she died?
Pathologists are quite good at identifying intervals since death in that first 24 hours. But in this case, the death was obviously a long time before that. The body was heavily infested with various forms of insect activity, so I knew that I couldn't help them. I knew it was important, but I couldn't help them, so I asked them to get an entomologist out of the scene.
Establishing the time of death is critical. And on this particular occasion, there were maggots on the body, which is a rather gruesome part of any murder investigation, but from a scientific and forensic point of view, the maggots can determine pretty much the exact time of death.
When I took the maggots that I'd collected from the murder victim's body back to the laboratory, I went about in the first place identifying the species of flies that they represented, to determine how long I thought those maggots had been in the body of the victim based on the likely temperature conditions that the maggots had experienced. The warmer it is, the quicker maggots will develop. So here I relied upon temperatures from the body as well as temperatures from the Bureau of Meteorology about the weather conditions in the area during the likely time that the body had been lying there. I estimated that the body had become infested by flies sometime during the morning of the 13th of April.
It meant that the victim had been murdered the night before, on Monday the 12th of April, some 5 days before her body was found.
With regard to who the deceased was, she had no personal effects. We didn't know other than the fact that she was obviously a young adult female with blonde hair. We didn't know who she was. But when I did the post-mortem, she had 3 missing teeth in the upper jaw and she had a number of gold restorations, and they were sufficiently odd that they would identify the deceased, providing someone reported her missing.
The victim is described as approximately 162 centimetres, 5 foot 4 inches tall. She had shoulder-length fair hair.
There were a number of females reported missing and similar in description, but because of the approximate age and the general description, it narrowed down to a lady who had been reported missing, Maya Jakic.
Apart from her age, height and hair colour, the missing persons report also indicated that the 30-year-old lived nearby to the crime scene. And more importantly, She wore a dental plate to hide 3 missing teeth.
The experts examined the actual dental records and they were able to say that positively it was Maya Jackick.
But Maya had been missing since the 6th of April, 6 days before the entomologist believed she had been murdered. So where had she been?
It was important to try and track her movements. Where had Maya been in the previous week? Who had she been mixing with? Because any of those people might have been suspects, could provide a motive for the murder.
What police were yet to realise was that on the same night she was strangled to death, the murderer had contacted them.
Yeah, there seems to be a body of some sort in the bushes there. I'm not too sure. I haven't gone near it. Where are you ringing from?
When the decomposed body of a young woman was found hidden among bushes, the manner of death was clear. She had been sexually assaulted and then strangled to death with her own clothing. But her identity was only made possible because of 3 missing teeth.
I just cooked my dinner and I was putting the dinner on the table. We watched the news and what I saw was a huge shock to me.
Maya Jackick's body was discovered on Saturday night after a note was left on the windscreen of a patrol car at the Norwood police station.
I just couldn't believe. I almost died of shock because I spoke to her mum just a few days ago. We're looking for her. Her mum was a couple of times a day passing the place where her body was covered with the branches without knowing that her daughter's body was lying on the ground.
According to the forensic entomologist, Maya's body had been lying there for 5 days. Her mother, however, had reported her missing 6 days before that time. So it was vital for the detectives to piece together her last movements.
Shortly after we'd established who the victim was, the investigation went to trying to obtain any information we could about Maya Jackick, her background, who knew her. It was very difficult because the more we tried to find out, the less information we were getting. There were dozens of people who actually knew her, but when it came down to who in fact she was or what they knew about her, they really knew nothing about her. And all the information we were getting was that she was wandering between Glenelg, the city, and her home at all times of the day and night.
Maya was well known to proprietors at the Martin shopping centre, where until about a month ago she was seen almost every day. They've spoken of a quiet but polite girl who always kept to herself.
Don't know exactly what she was doing around here, but I think only once in the past 10 months I'd seen her with a friend.
She didn't have many friends. I was like her last resort for everything. She didn't mix much with other people, no. Deep down, I think she was lonely. I think that maybe she had a little depression or something, and she didn't want to talk about that. I used to call her, you know, Maya, talk to me. Oh, she just didn't want to talk. All I wanted to know is who killed her and how the killer looks like. How somebody can do such a thing.
So far, the identity of the killer, like Maya's last days, remained a mystery. The note on the police car revealed no fingerprints. Detectives hoped the post-mortem would lead them to a suspect.
The importance of a sexual assault homicide these days is the DNA databank. With DNA technology, the ability of a particular piece of evidence to show that one person and no one else was responsible is highly specific. So our expectations, at least at that stage, were that we might find seminal fluid or hairs or fibres or any other contact trace evidence. But all the smears and swabs that I'd collected at the post-mortem came back negative. No DNA was found. In other words, no seminal fluid was identified.
Now, the reasons for that can be many and varied. Perhaps that there was no sexual contact, although we suspected that was unlikely to be the case. But perhaps the advanced state of decomposition can impact on that. But at the end of the day, we were not able to get any DNA.
The killer, it seemed, was totally without trace. He could be anyone and be anywhere. And at the time of the murder, there was a race in town.
He's going to get a rousing reception. Look at him go up. Craig Lowndes takes out
The Adelaide 500 racing carnival brought people from all over Australia, indeed from all over the world.
It was the gutsy V8 supercar race the crowd had come to see.
Visual programs here. The place is electric.
So this complicated the investigation, given that we really didn't have any idea as to who might have been the offender.
But then a breakthrough. Police learned that a call had come through on their hotline on the night the entomologist believed Maya had been murdered.
Police emergency.
Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, there's someone hanging around the old Paynham police station. Seems to be trying to break in there, I think.
That particular person was very, very important to the investigation because he certainly knew or saw something. And then, lo and behold, a short time later, we had information that came forward in relation to another 000 call where the ambulance was called.
Ambulance service? Yeah, I just walked past the old Paynham police station. There seems to be a body of some sort in the bushes there, I'm not too sure.
That call was also made on the Monday night.
Paynham Road, haven't gone near it. It's up off Paynham Road there.
In both instances, the police and paramedics went to the old police station mentioned by the caller. But there was no break and enter or a body, and the calls were dismissed as hoaxes. 5 days later, the note appeared, and fortunately they didn't go to the old police station, but came here to the old patrol base, where they found Maya's body in the bushes.
I think that we were in little doubt once we'd learned of the 2 000 calls and the note that they were all, or the one person was responsible for all of them. And it was fairly unlikely in our view that that person was an innocent bystander. We suspected that that person was in fact the offender.
Right, we'll get on ahead. What's your name? One side.
Because we can track the 000 calls. The first was made from a phone box quite near to where Maya's body had been located. The other 000 call was made from a phone box near the Royal Adelaide Hospital.
Where are you ringing from? A phone box? In the Adelaide? Yep. In the Royal Adelaide? Yep. So how do you know what's happening out at Paynham there? Well, I've just seen that there was a body there about half an hour ago. All right. You didn't stop to see what was happening there? No. No, all right. We'll get on ahead. What's your name? One side. Just let you know anyway. What's that?
The question that we were asking ourselves was the offender keeping an eye on the police investigation. Was he waiting and watching for the police?
30-year-old Maya Jakic had been strangled to death. Her body left in the bushes outside an old police patrol base. The killer had called police twice on the night he murdered her. And then 5 days later, police believed the same person placed a note on their patrol car. But while he left the note, he left no clues to his identity, except his voice.
Yeah, I just walked past the old Paynham police station. There seems to be a body.
We had to try and get that voice on the 000 call out to the public. It's not something that we'd done before, release a call from Crime Stoppers, but it was so important on this occasion, we believed that was the correct course.
This is 7 Nightly News with Graham Goodings and Jane Doyle.
Tonight, the tape police hope will help catch a killer. Police are asking you to watch and listen to our first story very carefully. We're going to show you a note sent to police and play an audio tape, either of which may lead to the killer of Maya Jakic, whose body was found at Paynham last month.
Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, there's someone hanging around the old Paynham police station. Seems to be trying to break in there, I think.
The voice of the man police believe holds vital clues in the Maya Jakic murder case. Major crime detectives have taken the extraordinary moves of releasing the tapes and note in a desperate attempt to get public help.
Well, we're certainly hoping that someone perhaps recognises the voice.
Anyone with information is asked to call Bank SA Crime Stoppers on 1800 333 000.
Hundreds of calls came in, but there were no solid leads.
We had hundreds of calls in respect to those 2 areas. People saying that the caller was someone they went to school with, next door neighbours, a variety of reasons why they thought the voice was someone and the author was someone else, but unfortunately it got us nowhere.
2 weeks later, they tried again.
With information drying up, detectives have again appealed for a mystery 000 phone caller to make contact with them and tell them what he knows.
Even a reward for $100,000 couldn't do the trick.
Unfortunately, some of these investigations do reach a stage where you've followed absolutely every possible line of inquiry, and each line of inquiry becomes a dead end.
The case remained open but was scaled down. 2 years on from Maya's murder, the team were now occupied with another mystery, the disappearance of 18-year-old Megumi Suzuki. Megumi had left her residence on Friday, August the 3rd at 7:41 a.m. She headed to school, and the security video showed her leaving at 3 in the afternoon.
Our initial information was that the last time that Megumi was seen alive was on the Friday afternoon down on the Rundle Mall having some coffee with some friends.
And the last person who she spoke to, she said that she believed that Megumi was going to Grenfell Street to catch the O-Bahn back to the place where she was living.
But it appeared Megumi never made it home on that Friday night.
I did phone her residence and ask if they could see if she was there. They said no, she wasn't in the room, and they said nothing had been touched. The bed hadn't been slept in, and also it had been the census weekend. I don't know if you remember when everybody was counted, and the census form was still there from the Friday night. So I was a bit concerned, and I had emailed the parents as well by then. Her mother had said that she never went anywhere without her teddy bear, and I knew then that there was something very wrong. I telephoned her boyfriend, her ex-boyfriend, to find out if he had heard from her, and he said no, he hadn't, and he had been worried about her as well because it was unusual for him not to hear from her. So I was quite convinced by that time that I needed to contact the police, which I did first thing on Thursday morning.
Megumi Suzuki was last seen by a friend at a city bus stop. Police began distributing missing person posters outside the Maya Centre late this afternoon.
At this stage, we didn't really know whether we had a homicide investigation or simply a missing person.
With posters, publicity and appeals in full swing, a man rang in with crucial evidence. He was a maintenance worker on the bus track that Megumi took home each weekday afternoon. And in the bushes nearby, he found her bag.
There was an identification card with her picture on there. There were numerous books with her name on it, and also a lot of her personal items.
I think the finding of her school books was the first step we had to say, I think that this is going to be a suspicious one. It raised our concern that Megumi may have met with foul play.
SES and mounted police scoured the scrub. The police helicopter was also called in.
There were a number of things actually missing from her possession, and one was her mobile phone. She also had a CD Walkman, which she always took with her, and that was also missing.
But what they did find was her credit card and a bus ticket. And those two items took her to one place, a BP service station in the opposite direction of her home.
So that alerted the investigators to the fact, well, why had she been travelling down there? Who might have she seen down there? And how might that information assist us in our investigation?
The BP console operator could pinpoint from his records what time and exactly what she purchased.
She had purchased a SIM card for her telephone. That alerted us to her mobile phone. We were able to then do some checks on the call charge records.
Megumi made 12 calls that night. The last, a text message, sent to her ex-boyfriend, who lived only a stone's throw away from the BP station.
It was fairly obvious now as to what was motivating Magumi to be at that particular location at that time. It was to go and see the boyfriend.
The last known sighting of 18-year-old Megumi Suzuki was at a BP station where she had bought a phone card. The records showed her last call was a text message to her ex-boyfriend.
We knew at that stage that he lived in the very near vicinity of the BP service station.
We actually spoke to him and he was with friends at another location that night. I think it was the picture show.
He was very, very helpful in our investigation. He was distraught and was making every attempt to assist the police in trying to locate Megumi. It was about a week later that he contacted police with a piece of underclothing, in fact a pair of pants, that he suspected may have belonged to Megumi. So it was important to determine and confirm, were they Megumi's?
In her room at the student residence, detectives found underwear of similar styles.
The distinguishing factor that did stand out was the fact that all her underwear, or the majority of her underwear, were all matching sets.
The bra that matched those pants wasn't located.
But through subsequent forensic testing, we were able to get a DNA match and confirm positively that they were her clothes.
It was a worrying sign, more so as her pants had seemed to appear out of thin air, just like the note on the patrol car.
It was interesting as to how did those pants get there? Were they placed there? Did they blow there by the weather?
But with no real evidence that Megumi had met with foul play, all the police could do was keep asking the public for their help.
Police will begin targeting city nightclubs as part of their search for missing Japanese student Megumi Suzuki.
Police will hand out the posters this weekend to the city's dance and karaoke clubs, where Megumi was a regular.
Although we have grave fears, at this stage I think that there is still a glimmer of hope. We will continue to work on that basis.
Megumi's parents have flown from Tokyo. They've released a statement thanking police and appealing for more information to help find their daughter. We love our daughter very much. We pray that in the coming hours there will be some positive news.
And it appeared their prayers were answered.
The witness and his wife claims they were only metres away from the missing student outside the Aqaba Hotel at 11:30 this morning. A dozen police patrol cars converged on the area. Streets surrounding the Howard Florey Reserve were blocked off as the dog squad and uniformed patrols thoroughly checked homes and questioned residents.
This particular sighting was from a person who knew Megumi and was associated with her accommodation.
I actually spoke to him myself and other detectives spoke to him. We were satisfied that he believed the person he saw was Megumi. And as a result of that, we thought, well, hello, yes, she's still alive.
I'm just glad that she's been sighted because she's not dead. That's the main thing. That's good news.
Good for her parents to know that she's okay and safe and sound. You wouldn't want to be in that position yourself.
The parents of missing teenager Megumi Suzuki have made an emotional plea to their daughter to come forward to police.
Megumi, もしこれを見ていたら早く出てきてほしい。
Megumi, if you saw this, please come forward as soon as possible. Father and mother can't sleep every day.
めぐみ、何も心配しなくていいから。
Don't worry about anything. Please come forward as soon as possible. Father and mother will protect you from now on. Please come forward.
But Megumi never made contact, and there were no more sightings.
At the one moment we thought that she might still be alive, then those hopes were dashed. It was a rollercoaster ride to us. We can only try and imagine the rollercoaster ride that the parents were on at that particular point in time.
8 weeks after Megumi had gone missing, her photo was put onto a new police website that had just been developed.
And on that same website, we were able to place the unsolved murder of Maya Jakic.
The police are also making a new bid to solve the murder of 30-year-old Maya Jakic, whose body was found over 2 years ago. Detectives have turned to the internet, trying to identify the man who made 2 emergency calls on the night of her murder.
Yeah, I just walked past the old Paynham police station. There seems to be a body of some sort in the bushes there.
People could dial onto the internet and listen to that call from indeed anywhere in Australia or perhaps anywhere in the world. So that wider exposure we thought was both innovative and critical in trying to get that breakthrough that we needed.
The strategy would work. Police were about to find out the long-needed identity of the caller and Maya's killer.
I listened to it about half a dozen times. I closed my eyes and listened to it, and I could see Mark talking to me.
Police knew that the killer of Maya Jakic was most likely the same person who made 2 emergency calls on the night that Maya was murdered. Who he was had eluded them. That was until the internet pulled him into its web.
The following is a taped voice of a male person who contacted police and ambulance 000 facilities during the...
And one particular person heard his voice.
1999. Police are seeking your assistance to identify the caller.
I logged on and found the tape and listened to it, and listened to it, and listened to it. And I listened to it about half a dozen times. I closed my eyes and listened to it.
Yeah, I just walked past the old Paynham police station. There seems to be a body.
And I was 90% sure that it was my brother. Perhaps Mark was involved with this crime that seemed rather out of character for Mark. He'd never been violent as far as I knew. So I listened to the tape again. And I remember I walked up the passageway a little bit and closed my eyes so there was some distance from the voice.
I don't know, I can vaguely see him. He's got a flashlight flashing around the place.
Inside or?
In and around the place.
And I could see Mark talking to me when I could hear that voice. So I sort of decided then that I had to ring Crime Stoppers. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. It's there's no damage done. But if I'm right, well, they need to know about it.
Stephen Rust said that he'd been away for a number of years and had just come back. He's seen the publicity, he heard the voice.
Yeah, there's someone hanging around the old Paynham police station.
And I could see the dilemma he was going through, because here he was identifying the voice as being that of his brother, Mark Rust.
Mark Rust was certainly known to us. We had his name in our files for more minor sexual offences.
It was a rather sickening feeling to realise that perhaps Mark had stepped over the line because he'd been in trouble for such a long time with the police and going to jail and parole. The family knew that he was building up and getting worse each time, and that eventually he would do something really terrible and end up in jail for the rest of his life. But at the same time, we'd always hoped that, you know, he wouldn't go that way. So when it was fairly certain that it was Mark who was involved, it was a nasty feeling. It left a very unpleasant taste.
While the police were convinced the 000 caller was Mark Rust, it wasn't enough to make an arrest. They would also need to prove that the note left on the patrol car was his handiwork. And Stephen Rust had provided them with a letter from his brother for comparison.
Our task was to look at the handwriting and see if it had been written by the person. One of the more outstanding features was the double cross on the T, which was a feature of both the specimen letter and the question note. Another feature was the way that the letters were spaced in the word, for example, in the word good. They were very tight and overlapping. And all of the words, particularly where they could be directly compared, words like the and of, and these were very similar in their appearance. In general, every single letter, every single word that could be directly compared showed very close similarities in both their form and in their appearance. I was convinced that the same person had written both the letter that was found on the patrol car and the specimen letter.
So after assessing all of the evidence, we were satisfied that we had a reasonable case, and as a consequence of that, the detectives went out and made the arrest.
A 37-year-old man has been arrested and charged with the murder of Maya Jakic 2 years after she died.
Late yesterday afternoon in Port Augusta, detectives arrested and charged a man.
They had found Mark in jail. His minor sexual offences had progressed to rape, and he was currently on remand in a prison some 300 kilometres away from where Maya was murdered.
Police don't believe there was any relationship between Miss Jakic and the accused. Her parents in Croatia have been contacted by detectives and say they're very pleased about the arrest.
Shortly after Mark Rust was charged and went back to the prison at Port Augusta, he obviously needed someone to confide in because he was probably shocked that he was eventually arrested. This resulted in an informant contacting us who passed on some very valuable information.
Mark had remained silent when he had been questioned and then charged with Maya's murder. It was a different story back at the prison.
The informant said that Mark had told him that he saw a tall, blonde girl walking along Paynham Road. He spoke to her. A struggle ensued, and then he pulled her into the bushes where he had sex with her, and he eventually ended up strangling her.
But it was what the informant told the police next that was totally unexpected.
As a result, we had to move very quickly and make a search of Mark Rust's cell and his belongings.
What they were looking for and found was a CD player. A CD player similar in shape and colour to the one that missing school student Megumi Suzuki had with her on the day she disappeared.
We contacted the mother in Japan, and she was in a situation where she could produce all the relevant document dating back and tracing that sale with the serial number to her and Megumi in Japan.
Of course, finding Rust in possession of some of Megumi's property didn't in itself mean that he'd committed the murder. So whilst it was an important part, there was still a lot more work to be done by the team of investigators.
37-year-old Mark Rust had been arrested and charged with the murder of Maya Jakic. His brother had identified his voice as that of the 000 caller, and a sample of his writing matched exactly that of the note left on the police car. Now Mark was a suspect in the murder of 18-year-old Megumi Suzuki. Her CD Walkman had been found in his cell after an informant contacted the police.
The informant also said in relation to Suzuki that he approached her. He had sex with her, and he said to her, "Don't look at me, whatever you do." She looked at him, saw his face, and as a result he attempted to strangle her. And then he actually killed her by hitting her on the head with a rock. We were also told that Megumi had been murdered on a vacant paddock and that he had burnt clothing or something there. As a result of the information, we went back to the BP service station. Directly opposite was a vacant block of land. We made a search of the vacant block of land and we found the seat of a fire.
The fire brigade was contacted. They confirmed they had put out a small fire on that vacant lot on the very night Megumi had disappeared.
Near the fire we found a rock which could possibly have been used in the offence. We found bits of burnt clothing and arm bracelets, and we knew that these were jewellery worn by Megumi Suzuki.
But Megumi's body had yet to be found. The only clue from the informant was that Mark Rust had dumped her into an industrial bin.
We combed the area based on some directions that were provided, and we did in fact find a bin at the rear of some premises on Goodwood Road.
The circumstantial evidence against Mark Rust was stacking up. But before they could make an arrest, the investigators needed to be absolutely sure that this was the bin where Mark had placed Magumi after he killed her, and they turned to the Rust family for help.
This must have been an enormous dilemma for them to assist the police, in effect, to establish and clarify whether Mark Rust was responsible. Nevertheless, they did provide that assistance, and they were able to confirm that the waste bin had a hippo on the side. The bin that we were looking at had similar markings, and that was the final lead that we needed to satisfy that we had a reasonable case to arrest Rust.
I was shocked about the Maya Jakic thing because it just came out of the blue and really sort of, you know, knocked the wind out of our sails. And then when Jerry told us about Megumi Suzuki, it just fitted together very nicely with what Mark had been doing. So I sort of believed it pretty much straight away.
Megumi's body hasn't been found, but it's understood it may have been dumped in an industrial bin and later at the Wingfield rubbish tip.
We have been praying for our daughter to be alive under any circumstances for the last 3 months. But this week we received the saddest news we could have had.
When they arrived out in Australia, Jerry Feltus took them down to the rubbish dump. And I think that that was obviously a very, very traumatic moment for the parents to sit on the side of a rubbish tip, knowing that somewhere amongst literally hundreds of tonnes of rubbish, there was the body of your daughter. So we certainly felt obligated to try and do everything possible to recover Megumi's body, and that was the next challenge for us.
But first, the grisly search for the murdered Japanese student, 18-year-old Megumi Suzuki, has begun at a Wingfield landfill site.
Megumi was dumped at the site nearly 4 months before, so numerous layers of baled rubbish were discarded until the level they believed she would be in was located. Then those bales were broken apart and searched.
We had to go through every bale. We were looking for things that related back to the particular date. We had to go through newspapers, invoices, everything with dates on it to ensure that we were in the correct area and we weren't moving out of it. You were going through trying to find things which kept you on track.
And after 11 days, and after removing tens of thousands of tonnes of rubbish, they were in the exact spot, and Megumi's body was found.
There was a mixture of relief and sorrow to think that someone could meet such an untimely death in the way that Megumi was murdered, and then to have a body dumped in the location that it was dumped was absolutely horrific.
The amazing thing about finding the body of Megumi Suzuki is that she still had her boots on, she still had clothing on, and the bra that she was wearing was an identical match to the pants which her ex-boyfriend had found in the laneway months earlier near the vacant block of land.
We believe that our daughter was found, thanks to the efforts of everyone involved in her search. We realise it was a very difficult task considering the circumstances. It is no exaggeration to say it was a miracle to find her so quickly.
But Rust's confession to murdering Megumi didn't come quickly. He maintained his innocence, as he did for the murder of Maya Jakic. Then, exactly 1 year after Megumi's body was found, he changed his plea.
There's been a shock development in the murder of Japanese student Megumi Suzuki. A 37-year-old man from the northeastern suburbs has pleaded guilty.
I know that you've done this. You know you've done it, and you need to put your hand up for it so that there's not a big court case. These poor families aren't dragged through this muck, and we can all get over it as best we can and bring some closure to everyone's life.
6 months later, Mark Rust also admitted to the murder of Maya Jakic on the 12th of April 1999.
The families of 2 young women brutally murdered by a homicidal predator have given harrowing accounts of the loss of their loved ones.
On behalf of the families, friends gave heartbreaking accounts of how the murders have totally devastated dozens of lives. Fusei Simpson described the Suzuki family's anguish, quoting Megumi's mother, "It makes me insane when I think of her being treated like rubbish." Ida Gregov related the thoughts of Maya's mother, Yagada. Why would anyone want to kill Maya like an innocent bird and cover her with branches and cover his dirty crime?
I done it with all my heart. And I did call Maya's mum and I said, this is what I done. I actually spoke on your behalf. And I saw the killer. And it's done, I said, it's finished.
Mark Rust was sentenced to life in jail without parole for both murders. The judge ruled that the 39-year-old was incapable of controlling his sexual urges and would be detained until further order.
You ask yourself, why has he done that? How could he have done that? Because we all grew up together in the same house. It's emotionally quite devastating to realise that someone so close to you in your immediate family can commit such a crime. It's really... It's devastating. It's I don't know, I can't really find the words to describe just how bad it makes you feel. It's a dreadful feeling.
The Suzuki family are still very distressed. They are really feeling it at the moment because they had great expectations for their daughter.
Maya's mother took her daughter's body back to Croatia, where she visits the grave every day.
We both lost a very, very special person. A lovely daughter and the most beautiful friend I ever had.
Stranger killings are one of the rarest and most difficult crimes to solve. So when a stranger kills twice, the pressure to find him before he strikes again is enormous. That was the challenge facing detectives and forensic officers of Task Force Midas.
Your body was found lying beside the Hendra police station in a vacant lot. It was discovered by a truck driver doing a U-turn. The body was that of a female. She was laying in the fetal position. She was dressed in a black top and a pair of ankle boots only. It could be seen that rigor mortis had set into the body, which indicated to us that she had perhaps been in that location and deceased for some 4 to 6 hours. She had obvious signs of stab wounds to her stomach and her back, and it appeared that her throat had been cut. The amount of blood found at the scene, to me, was not indicative of the injuries that had been suffered by the victim. That indicated to me that perhaps the primary crime scene was elsewhere and that this crime scene was a secondary crime scene, and that being where the body was dumped.
On the examination of the secondary crime scene, we located a set of tyre tracks, which we believe drove up towards the direction of the body, appeared to do a U-turn and reverse back to where the body was, and then drive away from the body. There was also a number of footprints from what appeared to be the same shoe. These footprints appeared to come from where you would expect the driver's door to be, and moved around the body and then back to where you would expect the driver's door to be. We established that the footprints at the crime scene were not left by the truck driver. This suggested to us that these tyre impressions and the footprints were more than likely the offenders.
I took photographs of the shoe sole impressions and tyre track impressions. In the future, we were hoping that we could match these up to a vehicle and to the footwear of a possible offender. We also took measurements of the width that the wheels are apart. We call this like an axle width. If we could locate a vehicle, we would compare these measurements to the wheels they have and also the axle length of the vehicle to hopefully positively identify that that vehicle had been at the scene.
But in order to identify the offender and then put him, his car and shoes at the crime scene, the detectives needed to identify the victim first.
We had nothing, no wallet or anything to assist us at the scene at the time, so I took digital photos of the deceased, and due to the clothing she was wearing, we had an idea that possibly she might have been from the Fortitude Valley area, which is the red light district of Brisbane. These photographs were sent in to detectives in there and they were able to give us a name of Jasmine Crethern, a known street worker there. Postmortem was conducted on the deceased and we located at least 14 stab wounds that we could clearly make out. Most of these stab wounds were probably around 2.5 centimetres wide. Some of them were up to 16 centimetres deep, which would indicate there was quite a grisly and aggressive attack on the deceased.
The murder weapon was most likely around 15 to 17 centimetres in length. Not a serrated edged weapon, more than likely a clean blade, possibly a clean blade on both sides, so therefore a dagger type weapon.
With no defence injuries and the toxicology report indicating there were no drugs that would have caused Jasmine to become unconscious, it was more than likely this was a surprise attack.
And because she was only partially clad, led us to believe that possibly the offender in this case could well have been a client or a customer.
However, prostitutes, due to the nature of their work, they have a large client base, which leads us to quite a large, or possibly large, suspect pool to look at.
So in order to narrow that field, as well as look at other possible suspects who may have known and wanted to kill Jasmine, detectives went to the red light district.
Once it was explained to them that we weren't interested in their day-to-day activities, that we were interested in solving a murder of a friend or an associate of theirs, they were more willing to speak to police.
We discovered that in addition to the clothing that Jasmine was found in, she was also, prior to the incident, wearing a beige short miniskirt, a beige sports type jacket and carrying a black handbag. We also learnt that an associate by the name of Renee had also lent her a black top, and we suspected that the black top was in fact hers.
That top, along with Jasmine's boots, were currently being forensically examined to see whether any DNA from the offender could be found. But now that police knew what she was wearing that night, they hoped they might find her with her killer on footage from the various cameras around the valley.
This footage was viewed. It was a quite time-consuming task, however important task. And from this footage we were able to obtain one sighting of Jasmine at the BP service station.
But in this one sighting, Jasmine was alone. It was 8:32 p.m, and police knew she would meet her killer in the next 3 to 8 hours. And one suspect had just emerged.
Our inquiries in relation to this male person found that he had just recently been released from prison, in fact for a very serious stabbing assault.
Police investigating the murder of 41-year-old sex worker Jasmine Crethurn say she was stabbed up to 20 times.
So in all, it's a very frenzied attack.
Her semi-clad body was found by a truck driver in a vacant lot on Thursday. Detectives investigating the case believe she was murdered elsewhere. Tyre marks in the dirt where Ms Crethurn's body was found are being examined.
In relation to the tyre impressions found at the scene, unfortunately there was no database concerning tyre types. It was the case that we went door to door to tyre manufacturers in the possibility of locating that tyre.
These initial inquiries were unsuccessful in identifying the tyre. However, from the base characteristics of the tyre, the tread pattern was more than likely what they referred to in the tyre industry as a highway tread, and this was used generally on light commercial vehicles, in particular utilities and vans.
Detectives then turned their attention to the shoe impression.
We sent photographs to a police officer who maintained a database in relation to many types of shoes and styles and that sort of thing. This shoe impression was then identified to us as a T-boot, which is a common work boot used by many different people. We then contacted the distributor or the sales rep for T-boot in the Brisbane area. She then provided us with certain information, namely that sole pattern on that shoe impression had been around for some 30 years, so therefore the possibility of tracing any T-boot was going to be a dead end in regards to further inquiries. However, it may provide us with a good point of reference should a person of interest be located down the track.
One such person had just been nominated.
Information was obtained that a previous boyfriend of Jasmine's had treated her badly in the past. We conducted a number of inquiries in relation to this person, and it was from these inquiries we established that he'd committed a previous murder. Obviously this aroused our suspicion.
He was located and extensively interviewed. As a result of this interview, he was eliminated from our inquiries based on a number of reasons, namely he had a solid alibi in relation to the time frame that we had established, and further that in relation to the tyre impressions and the shoe impressions found at the scene, none of these could be linked back to him in any way that we could discover at that stage.
Another suspect came to our attention through information obtained by prostitutes from working in the Fullerton Valley area. This information related to a male person who was currently standing over a number of the girls, as well as assaulting them and dealing drugs.
Our inquiries in relation to this male person found that he had just recently been released from prison, in fact for a very serious stabbing assault.
However, like the ex-boyfriend, this standover man was eliminated from inquiries. He too had an alibi that checked out, and his footwear and car tyres didn't match the impressions left at the crime scene. But detectives now had a further piece of forensic evidence to add to their list of criteria.
We were advised that a DNA sample had been obtained from a semen stain located on the top that Jasmine Crethurn was wearing at the time she was located. We believed that this semen stain was more than likely to have come from a client. We hoped that this client would also be the offender. That DNA sample was then compared to DNA samples that are contained on the DNA database. From that, we were advised that there was no match, so we had an unknown DNA sample.
We located a number of regular clients that used the services of Jasmine. DNA was also taken from all of these regular clients voluntarily, and all of these regular clients were eventually eliminated as persons of interest.
There were two possible scenarios that Jasmine was either killed by a person that she knew or by a stranger, a client that she just met on that night. At this time of the investigation, we were fairly confident that we had spoken to most of Jasmine's male associates and had eliminated them as being possible suspects. So it led us to believe that we were more than likely looking at a stranger, someone that wasn't known to Jasmine, a client that she had met that night.
Police investigators converged on Deepwater Bend Reserve, where the woman's body was found by council workers at 7:30 this morning.
Now, 6 months later, it appeared another sex worker may have met that same client.
She was sort of bound face down and could see stab wounds.
The workers used their own perimeter tape to cordon off the area.
Thought we'd better restrict the area, obviously, the crime scene.
Police believe the body hadn't been there long.
Every likelihood is that the person's only been here some hours.
The body was located lying face down in the car park. The body was completely naked except for a sandal that was on her left foot. There were a number of stab wounds to her back, her chest and her side. A digital image was obtained of the deceased's fingerprint, and she was identified as a 42-year-old Brisbane prostitute by the name of Julie McCall. She had a number of ropes that were tied around her legs, her waist, her hands, and she was also wearing what appeared to be a blindfold and a gag.
Julie McCall had been stabbed 24 times, and like Jasmine Crethurn, a number of those wounds were 16 centimetres deep. But this time, the actions of the killer weren't as frenzied.
The ropes hadn't been damaged in any way, which showed to me that the actions of the offender had been very methodical and deliberate.
However, those undamaged ropes were providing a possible lead.
Knowing the way that the ropes had been tied and the work that Julie did indicated to us that bondage may have been used and that the person using these ropes was experienced in bondage.
Now, we were of the opinion that these were the property of the murderer. It wouldn't be items typically carried around by a prostitute waiting for a potential bondage client. And we believe that a scientific examination of those might lead us to the owner of those items and potentially the killer. We learnt from our inquiries that the rope that was used to tie up Julie was a multi-plait braid cotton type rope, which is a fairly common type of rope. And on the end of the piece of rope which was used to tie her wrists, there was what are referred to as rope end clips, which are placed on the end of the rope to prevent fraying.
While the rope was common, the good news for detectives was that this rope could not be bought with these rope clips attached.
They had been crimped with a tool. We then had the future potential to find the tool which had been used to crimp those based on the impressions that the tool left.
But like the tyres and shoe impressions in the Jasmine Crethurn case, it was a matter of finding the suspect first, and a discarded cheque that had been found right next to Julie's body was their next point of call.
There's a motive here for this guy. I mean, here he is using the services of this woman, and now she's robbed him of his money.
When Julie McCall was found dead, I immediately feared the worst. I was actually at home and got a telephone call, and I immediately had a sinking feeling in my stomach that we had the same offender who'd struck again. I knew how difficult it had been in relation to the first investigation of Jasmine's murder, and I thought to myself, here we go again.
When the area surrounding the victim at Deepwater Bend Reserve was searched,
There were no shoe and tie print evidence found. This may have been due to the fact that it was raining on the night of the offence. However, right near the body, we located a scrunched up cheque. We were able to see that it was a personal cheque. This, we thought, was a great breakthrough in the case because it gave us an opportunity to identify who may have last been with the victim. The owner of the cheque was identified. His premises were placed under surveillance.
Excuse me, sir.
Upon him returning to his premises, he was interviewed at length. He provided details of his contact with the deceased Julie, and he said that in a period prior to her murder, he had used her services as a prostitute, and that during that time he had been potentially drugged and had some checks stolen from him. This then gave us a thought of, well, there's a motive here for this guy. I mean, here he is using the services of this woman, and now she's robbed him of his money. However, he provided an alibi as to his movements on the night before, and we were able to verify this was the case. Now, we were also able to find out that the version he provided with regard to the theft of his cheques was in fact true. So at that stage, we really didn't have a lot more to go on, but he certainly wasn't out of the picture as such. We just needed to make further inquiries in other avenues.
Normally they walk these streets in darkness waiting for business to come to them, but fears they're being targeted by a serial killer who grabs his victims at night has them scared.
It could be any guy out here, we don't know. There's plenty of weirdos and, I mean, just safer during the day.
When Julie was found, of course, there was a lot of media in relation to the death. The media were talking about the fact it might have been a serial killer. Our worst fears was the fact that there could be a person out there who was killing street workers. We now had 2 women who'd been murdered violently, stabbed to death in the space of 6 months, and it was quite possible that there was a person out there who could strike again. So it was decided that the most effective way to investigate this murder and the still unsolved murder of Jasmine Crethurn was to set up a dedicated task force. It was codenamed Task Force Midas, and it was set up trying to solve these 2 murders and to look back at 2 other attacks on street workers in 1998. This was the murder of Elizabeth Henry and the serious bashing of Karen Redmile.
Initially, each investigation will stand alone, and at this stage it's too early to make a comment as to whether we're looking at one person involved or a number.
One fellow streetwalker believed she may have the answer, at least to Julie's murder. Jacinda thought she may have been the last person to see her friend alive and to have met her killer.
Jacinda told us that at about 2:30 on that morning, she'd had a conversation with Julie on Brunswick Street in Fortitude Valley. They had a discussion about how quiet the night was, the weather, etc. About 20 minutes later, Jacinda was approached by a man. She had a conversation with him during which he asked for something a little bit different, and he then elaborated and said that he wanted to tie her up. Jacinda was not interested in this person's request. She then got out of the vehicle. The male person drove off and said to her, "I might be back." Sometime after that, Jacinda walked down to see where Julie was working and found that she was no longer there. Jacinda described the driver of the vehicle as male, obviously, Caucasian, fair-skinned, approximately 40, 45 years old, overweight, with a beer gut, a moustache, a fat, chubby face, and wearing a navy blue polo shirt of some description.
Her street savvy had allowed police to compile a comfit of this suspect. She then went on to describe the car.
Jacinda described the car as a fairly new 2-wheel drive twin cab utility because she stated to me that when she sat in the front passenger seat, she could place her left leg on the bitumen, which she said wasn't consistent with sitting in a 4-wheel drive. She described that it had a matching canopy. It was the same colour as the body of the vehicle, and she also said that it had a Queensland registration plate.
Police then went through the same process they had with Jasmine Crethurn and obtained all the security vision in the area to see if they could identify the utility and, more importantly, its number plate.
With a stroke of luck, we found a car similar in description that drove through the valley that night. The vehicle was spotted 3 times on these tapes, and we thought, here we go, we're onto something here. But due to the quality of the video footage and also it was raining, we weren't able to identify a registration number or the make and model or the type of vehicle it may be. We then went about a number of the Northside car dealerships with the photos to show these dealership owners to see if they could identify the type of car involved. A general consensus after a variety of makes and models were put forward was that it was more than likely a Mitsubishi Triton, 1996 to 2001 model MK Triton.
When those working on the Jasmine Crethurn case learnt about this find, they were extremely interested. And while they had yet to identify the tyre that had left the impression at the crime scene, they did know that it was likely made from one that was on a ute.
The track width of Mitsubishi Triton was compared to the track width left at the Crethurn crime scene, and they were found to be very similar. This was a further indication to us that it was extremely possible that the two murders were in fact linked. It was more than likely that we were looking at one offender for both murders.
Police believed that Julie McColl's killer was driving this Mitsubishi ute. The vehicle was caught on camera only 90 minutes after Julie was seen walking the streets. They also believed the driver was responsible for the murder of Jasmine Crethurn 6 months earlier. Detectives on that case had discovered that the width between the tyres of this model Mitsubishi ute was the same as that found at Jasmine's crime scene. It was encouraging news, but they still needed to find the tyres that made the impression.
As we'd already made inquiries with the major manufacturers, we decided to look at other avenues. These avenues led us to retreaders.
They indicated to us that it wasn't a retread tyre at all, and that perhaps it was a cheap imported tyre. We attended at one particular importer. We asked the manager if we could possibly walk through the warehouse just to examine some tyres there, because at this stage we knew the tread pattern of our tyre inside out and back to front. Whilst walking through the warehouse, we discovered the tyre, and it was a Chinese imported tyre. It had only been imported into Australia since the year 2000. That only a couple of thousand had actually been imported and sold, and that this manager was the only person who imported that tyre into Australia.
After several months of being quite frustrated with our investigation, we finally obtained a piece of evidence which we may be able to use to identify our offender.
So as detectives Paskin and Ryan began to go through the 2,000 or so possible buyers of the tyre, back at the McColl investigation, a list of several hundred registered Mitsubishi Tritons had been identified. The only problem was there was no way of telling whether the ute was a two-wheel drive with a dual cab, as seen in the security vision.
So we were looking for ways that we could narrow that field. The security footage also indicated to us that the vehicle had a number of non-manufacturer features to it, and that included very distinctive pinstriping down the side. And there was a CB aerial that was discernible. There were also fog lights on the vehicle and a small nudge bar and a plexiglass canopy on the back that was in the same colour as the vehicle. And we used these features to develop a criterion to recognise the vehicle. Our primary focus was on vehicles to the north of Brisbane, and that was essentially because the two dump sites for the two bodies were adjacent to the Gateway Arterial Road that heads north from the Brisbane River right through to the Sunshine Coast.
So as they headed back one day from checking out vehicles on the north side, they noticed a utility driving towards them on the opposite side, heading back to that crucial area. It had all the extra features police had been looking for.
At that point, we attempted to pursue the vehicle, but by the time we could get to an exit and get to the opposite side of the road, the vehicle had gone.
Meanwhile, Mitsubishi Australia were able to provide police with information to distinguish which Tritons were two-wheel drive dual-cab utilities. The list of suspect vehicles was now dramatically reduced to 160 in Queensland and to 26 in the focal area north of Brisbane.
And amongst those was one vehicle. I conducted checks in relation to that vehicle and discovered that a fellow by the name of Francis Michael Fahey had been ticketed in that vehicle. I conducted checks in relation to Mr Fahey and established that sometime previous he had been convicted of a work cover fraud offence, and a prison photo existed of him. I managed to obtain a copy of that photo, and I compared it to a confit likeness that had been prepared by an eyewitness and saw that there were similarities. We then proceeded out to the Narangba address, where we observed, sitting in the driveway, a grey MK Triton that clearly had the pinstriping that we were looking for, CB aerial, and that it had other features, including the grey canopy, consistent with the colour of the vehicle,
Because the vehicle was facing towards the garage, we were unable to see whether it had fog lights or the nudge bar on the front, but we were satisfied that that was the vehicle that was depicted in that CitySat footage. We proceeded back to headquarters and put mechanisms in place to have the vehicle put under surveillance. During surveillance of Faye, we were able to determine that he did frequent the Deepwater Bend Reserve at Bald Hills, where Julie McColl was located. And on one such occasion, our surveillance team was able to see that in his vehicle was a pair of T-boots.
Detectives then began inquiries to confirm whether Francis Faye could be the owner of those T-boots. With this genuine suspect now in their sights, they didn't want to blow their chances by jumping in too early and speaking with him without collecting as much evidence as they could.
It was established that Francis Faye used to work for the Queensland Ambulance Service. Inquiries made with the sales rep for T-boots ascertained that at one point in time T-boots were supplied to the Queensland Ambulance.
Investigations were then conducted in relation to Faye spending some time in the Rockhampton jail, and they subsequently sent us through a list of all his property that he had on him at the time of him being incarcerated. On this list, it could clearly be seen that at the time of Faye's incarceration, he had in his possession and was wearing a pair of T-boots. Information was then received from surveillance team that the tyres located on Faye's vehicle were in fact the same Chinese import tyre that we had located the tread of at our crime scene of Jasmine Crethurn. As a result of this, investigators became more and more confident that the murders of Julie McColl and Jasmine Crethurn were in fact linked, as we had thought. At this point in the investigation, we had established that Faye owned and wore T-boots, that he had Chinese import tyres on his vehicle that matched our crime scene, that he had knowledge of the Deepwater Bend area. The only piece of the puzzle that remained outstanding for us at this point in regards to investigations was the DNA. At this point, we placed Faye under surveillance, and as a result, a discarded cigarette butt from Faye was seized by police and subsequently analysed. As a result of this being analysed, it was found that the DNA was a perfect match to that located on the shirt of Jasmine Crethurn.
Detectives then returned to speak to the prostitute who they believed had loaned Jasmine the T-shirt. They needed to check if she had worn that T-shirt while working, and whether Francis Faye was a client of hers, which could possibly explain why his semen was on it. But Renee had realised that the T-shirt was not hers, and while the story she was about to tell police never made it beyond a committal hearing, it was important evidence at the time.
Talking to Renee in relation to the shirt, that we stumbled upon the fact that Renee had had a near-death experience herself in relation to a client.
Renee was shown a photo board, which also included a picture of Faye, and she identified that he had been a customer of hers in early 2002.
That was 6 months before Jasmine was murdered.
Renee told us that she had been picked up by Faye whilst working as a prostitute in Brunswick Street, Fortitude Valley, and that he had driven her to a location on the north side of Brisbane. She stated that they had sexual intercourse in his motor vehicle, and as she was about to redress herself, Faye produced a pair of handcuffs, identified himself as an officer with the Australian Taxation Department and that she was under arrest, and he tried to handcuff her within the motor vehicle. She was able to escape. Faye followed her in his motor vehicle and attempted to run her down.
When investigators learned about the incident with Renee, it became clear that Francis Faye's violence was increasing every 6 months. Initially with Renee, where he tried to run her over. After that, there was the murder of Jasmine, where she was stabbed 14 times. After that, there was the murder of Julie, where she was stabbed up to 22 times. It was clear that his violence was escalating.
It was now 3 months since Julie's murder, and police felt they had sufficient evidence to ensure no other prostitute would meet the same fate. A warrant was obtained for Faye's arrest, and his house searched for further evidence.
Up to 50 officers moved in at 5:30 this morning, executing search warrants. The precise raids were orchestrated by Task Force Midas. It's the special team investigating the murders of Fortitude Valley streetwalkers Julie McColl, Elizabeth Henry and Jasmine Crethurn, and the attempted murder of Karen Ann Redmile.
We are interviewing the occupants of the house
those people are assisting police with their inquiries and continue to do so at this time. Mate, we're part of Task Force Midas, and that task force is investigating the deaths of a number of prostitutes from the Fortitude Valley area over a period of time from 1998 onwards. Do you understand that?
Yeah.
All right.
Once we had arrived back at police headquarters, we participated in a record of interview with Faye about the murders of the prostitutes. He was quite calm and calculating during the interview.
Mate, on the way in the car, you told me that you are a regular visitor to the Valley area.
I have been, yeah.
All right.
With regards to the Valley, he indicated that he had been to the Valley late at night as he was concerned for a family member who had been frequent in the Valley.
And as far as I was aware, was originally she wasn't getting any money from Social Security, so she had to be getting the money from somewhere. My first thoughts are that because she was going down the Valley, that she was what they call a working girl.
Did you get any response from the working girls?
No.
I think you told me some were a bit pissed off when they found out you weren't a customer.
Yeah.
Mate, and you told me in the car that you've never been a customer of the prostitutes down there in the Valley?
No.
And you don't know Jasmine Grathern or Julie McColl, who were two prostitutes who were working down there?
No.
And as I recall, you said that on occasion, or at least one occasion or two occasions, the girls actually sat in the vehicle and talked with you? Is that right?
There was a couple of rainy nights there, yeah. I mean, I'm not an arsehole, if you know what I mean. I mean, if somebody comes up and, and wants to chat, that's fine. I mean, they can sit in the car because I'm there to find out what's happening with my stepdaughter.
It became quite apparent that the explanation being provided by Faye was that, well, we must have known he was in the Valley, hence why he provided a version as to why he's in the Valley, and should we locate anything in his vehicle that may be linked to a prostitute, he gives this explanation of how if it was raining they would sit inside his vehicle.
Well, I told him, not interested, but I said, could you do me a favour? They sort of look at me, we don't do any favours, so I explained who I was looking for, and they said no, we haven't seen him.
Do you recall anything else that was said to them, or they said to you?
I was actually told what the prices were there at one stage, and they vary.
During the interview with Faye, he also openly admitted to attending Deepwater Bend, being the other crime scene. He would talk about the fact that he would go there fishing.
So where do you put in, if you're going to fish the Pine River, where do you put in from?
I put in at Deepwater Bend. I prefer to stick to the more sheltered waters.
Yep.
I usually find the fishing's a damn sight better. I like to fish in spots away from the fucking idiots on their jet skis and the water skiers. So I stay around that area.
This again was a way of him trying to show that, well, okay, the police know I must have been there. Well, the reason I've been there is because I go fishing there.
What Faye didn't know was how much evidence the police already had, and how much more was building since they entered his house.
Just cast your mind back to the end of February, around about the 26th of February. That's when Julie McColl was murdered on the 26th.
Mm-hmm.
Mate, can you tell us what you were doing on that day, or where you would have been?
I've got no bloody idea. None whatsoever. What day of the week is it?
It's a Wednesday morning.
So it's a Tuesday night, Wednesday morning sort of thing.
On Tuesday night I would have been home, I suppose, watching Law and Order if it was on.
Francis Faye had been in custody for nearly 4 hours, and at no time had he flinched in terms of his guilt.
Her name's Jasmine Grathern. Never ever seen her before? No.
Police already had a strong body of evidence against him for the 2 murders, but they hoped they would find more in his house.
Mate, we've just got to wait for a little bit longer to get some results on some tests and that. And, they could be done by now.
Mm.
And it's just, mate, it won't be much longer, but we'll just have to suspend the interview, mate.
Mm-hmm. One of the very first things that we saw was a set of T-boots. In fact, there was 2 sets of T-boots at the front door of the house. These were taken away for scientific analysis. The dimensions of the shoe, the size of the shoe, the scuff and wear marks on the tread pattern matched perfectly to the shoe prints left in the dust beside Jasmine's body.
A drop of blood was found on the left T-boot. This blood was subsequently analysed and matched to that of Jasmine Crethern.
We found a boat in the garage. The boat had an outboard motor, and tied around the outboard motor was a rope. The rope was found to be of exactly the same construction and the same material as the ropes found tying up Julie McColl's body. And the rope was also crimped with metal crimps on the end of the rope. Also, we found a crimping tool. Impressions from the crimping tool were placed into lead, and the identifying marks in the lead were then compared by microscope with the marks left on the crimps that were attached to the ropes that tied up Julie McColl's wrists. These crimp marks were found to be an identical match. The most beneficial evidentiary thing we found in Francis Fay's house was a bayonet. The dimensions of this weapon were consistent with the wounds that were caused to both Julie and Jasmine.
During the search of the house, there was a lengthy break between two of the interview tapes, and this is when a lot of the main information was coming in.
I'd ever smoke another cup of coffee or a glass of water? Another glass of water.
We feel at that time that Fay was having problems, sticking to this story. He must have known that we were getting a lot of evidence that could link him to these crimes, and it was getting too much for him to bear. It was at this stage that Fay summoned us back to the interview room.
Mate, a short time ago I was called back into the room. I was told that you wanted to speak to me.
Yep.
Mate, what is it you want to talk about on this occasion?
I just want to get a lot of shit off my chest.
Mate, is it in relation to the matters that we have spoken to earlier this morning?
Yep, two only. And that's the one at Hendra and the one at Deepwater Bend.
Fay then started to talk about the death of Jasmine Crethern. He indicated how he picked her up in the valley that night.
And this bird jumped in and wanted to know if I wanted any company. And I said, yeah, I don't mind the company. And she told me what the prices were, $50 for a blowjob. And it kind of appealed to me, so I agreed. And we drove into a vacant lot. She wanted to be paid first up, and so I paid her the $50, and we walked to the back of the car and had oral sex. The condom broke, and next thing I recall is that I'm hooking along the bloody gateway to fucking Great Road of Knots. The other one, I pulled up there at the Night Owl place. I got a cup of coffee from there, and I think I got something to eat. Can't remember what I had to eat. I pulled into a side street. I think it was on the right-hand side, heading back towards the wall. Pulled up there to finish my coffee. Got a tap on the window, and this bird was offering different services and whatever. She offered to give me a blowjob for $25, I think it was. And she sat in the car with me while I was finishing my coffee, and she started, talking about what turned me on, that sort of stuff, and that led to the bondage thing. And then she suggested that we go back to her place. I said no, I wouldn't be in that. I wouldn't feel safe. And the only place I could think of was Deepwater Bend. I told her about it, and she agreed to go. With this sort of weather, she said, I'm not going to get much business tonight. We drove to there, and I remember tying her up. I remember getting the blowjob. The next thing I remember, I'm pulled up on the side of the road underneath the bridge, and I'm using these drink bottles and cordial bottles to wash blood off my legs. And I threw my guts up. I remember doing that.
Both of these women have died from stab wounds?
Yeah.
Mate, can you tell me how these stab wounds came to be inflicted?
Well, I obviously stabbed them, but I don't have much recollection about it at all.
Do
Do you recall what you did it with?
I think it was the bayonet they had in the car. I used to use that years ago for when I was pigging. It was good for killing the pig, you know.
Mate, I showed you these two photos earlier and you said you didn't recognise them. I'm now going to show you two photos again. That's Julie McColl, mate, and that's Jasmine Crethern.
So they still don't mean anything to me. Well, obviously they are the two women involved. But, yeah, I've never sort of looked at them that much. Didn't really care.
During the investigation and interview, police were able to discount Faye being involved in the murder of Elizabeth Henry and what has now become, since her death, the murder of Karen Redmill. These murders remain unsolved.
Frances Faye was charged with 2 counts of murder in relation to the deaths of Jasmine Crethern and Julie McColl. The trial was held in September 2005 and ran for 3 weeks. Frances Faye chose not to call evidence or give evidence on his own behalf. The jury was out for 6 hours and returned a guilty verdict in relation to both counts of murder.
Frances Faye was sentenced to 2 life imprisonments to be served concurrently. He must serve a minimum of 25 years, which means he will be eligible for parole in 2028.
The verdict was welcomed by investigators who helped put Queensland's second convicted serial killer behind bars.
We hope now there's some closure for the families that were involved in what has been a very difficult investigation.
Faye's shoe prints were found at the scene of Crethern's murder. Forensic testing matched the prints to Queensland Ambulance issue boots.
It was somewhat prophetic that the task force was codenamed Midas because everything we touched did turn to gold in terms of the evidence.
From a forensic perspective, I think this was the perfect investigation. I think every piece of evidence that we uncovered gave us a result.
It's extremely satisfying to the task force members and the whole police service that Frances Faye was convicted of these murders. I've got no doubt that if he hadn't been convicted, he would have continued to offend.
Do you feel any better or not?
To a certain degree I do, to a certain degree I don't. I mean...
Don't know why it happened?
I don't know why it happened. Because it's you know, I spent all my fucking life saving lives. Now I'm fucking taking them and I don't know why.
When a young girl's body was found in this park in the teeming rain, police had the odds stacked against them. They would need to call upon all of their investigative and forensic skills to solve a crime that even today sends chills down the spines of those who lived through it.
We were called out about 8 o'clock that evening, an absolutely horrific night. We had a major downpour of rain and wind, and that was a major concern for us.
The potential for loss of evidence is enormous in an external scene like that. The biological evidence that we would have been looking for would have been blood and basically other body fluids, but given the conditions, the likelihood was that we weren't going to find those.
So the offender in this case couldn't have asked for a better night from his perspective to commit the crime, and it caused us great problems that we virtually didn't glean much evidence from the scene at all.
The deceased was obviously a young female. She was laying face up, and there was a very small tree branch laying across the body. I have no reason why that was put there. It certainly didn't disguise the body at all. In terms of a sexual assault, her pants and lower body clothing were intact, but the upper body was exposed. There was significant and massive wounds to the throat, which were the obvious cause of death to me at that time.
The autopsy examination revealed that she had a number of bruises and abrasions on the arms and hands, which suggests there may have been attempts at defence. However, there were no injuries to suggest that her arms and hands had come in contact with a knife or other sharp instrument.
It suggested that the victim had lost consciousness before she was attacked with the knife, and tiny pinpoint blood clots were the telltale signs.
Around the eyes and present within the tissue lining the inside of the eyelids were some small hemorrhages known as petechial hemorrhages, and they are consistent with her having had strangulation occurring during life. There were some minor injuries suggesting the body had been moved and possibly dragged.
It was an insight into the murderer's method of killing. But marks on the victim's chest were a further and troubling signature.
There was no bruising or bleeding present within the soft tissues. These features suggest that these injuries occurred after death.
What caused me concern, and all of us concern in the team, was this crisscross on the chest. Is it satanic? Have we got just a thrill killer? Why has he done it? He, she, because it's not gender-based.
As detectives learnt of an 18-year-old reported missing, crime scene examiners continued their search.
Next morning, the weather was much better. Rain had stopped and it was much more suitable for searching a crime scene. In an area not far from where the body had been, there was a blue and white sports bag which contained a number of school books, and a number of those books were in the name of Elizabeth Stevens.
Elizabeth Stevens' body was found in a drain late on Saturday at Lloyd Recreation Reserve, less than half a kilometre from her home. Originally from Hobart, she was completing her VCE at Frankston TAFE and was living with her uncle at Langwarrin.
We couldn't believe it, that it was her. We kept expecting her to walk through the front door.
Homicide detectives have very few leads in the investigation and are yet to establish a motive for the brutal killing. They're now trying to piece together Elizabeth Stevens' movements.
Piecing together the movements of your victim is absolutely paramount for us. We knew that she'd left a note for her uncle and auntie, that she was going to the TAFE College library. She gave an estimated time of return of 8 o'clock. So we knew she had travelled and placed herself down at the Frankston CBD. We were able to establish that Elizabeth made a call to her sister and she was going to go visit her the next day.
Are we still on for shopping tomorrow?
And we know that call was made from the CBD of Frankston.
The police would now turn to the public for their help. But at one house, they were going to get more than they expected.
When I said there was significant blood, there was significant blood in the house. We were confident we were on a winner.
The body of 18-year-old Elizabeth Stevens was found in a park not far from her home. There seemed little motive as to why she had been so brutally murdered. The police needed to piece together her last movements, and for that, they would rely on the public.
Any investigation we undertake, we rely so heavily on the cooperation and assistance from the public. There's only few of us, but many of them.
Police hope this mannequin, dressed in clothes similar to those worn by Elizabeth Stevens on the night she disappeared, will jog the memory of anyone who may have seen the teenager near the Frankston TAFE last Friday night.
We did pamphlets and roadblocks where we set up a mannequin dressed in similar clothes, and that led to witnesses coming forward, and that pieced together for us the places that Elizabeth had been. One was at a takeaway food bar, which was in the heart of Frankston. We had another sighting at the TAFE College, probably around 7 o'clock that evening. We then had to satisfy ourselves, how did she get back to the location where she's in fact found? And the bus was the most obvious form of transport. Was she followed by someone from the cafe that she went to? Did someone travel on the bus with her?
While the calls kept coming in from the public, Charlie Bazina and his team were door-knocking the area. And when they stopped at one house, they thought they'd hit the jackpot.
There was one particular house we went to where this particular individual at the house slammed the door in our face. And police arouses our suspicion. As a result of that, we get into the house and there was blood everywhere. So in finding the house as we did, immediately we treat that as a crime scene. And as it turned out, this guy had just self-mutilated and that was it. But that caused us a lot of man-hours to eliminate him as a potential suspect.
The detectives were virtually back to square one.
So you go from your peak back down to a trough. And then we had the crushing news that we learnt of a woman being reported missing from the Frankston area.
More than 100 SES officers joined police in an intense search today for any trace of Deborah Ann Freem.
They're tearing us apart. She's got a son here that's 12 days old. We just can't handle it.
All reports were that Debbie was a loving,
caring mother, happy about the fact that she had a new baby on the scene.
She loves her child, she loves me. Since the birth, it's just been unreal. You know, life couldn't be better until this.
There was considerations of, because she was a new mum, was she suffering from postnatal depression?
It seemed unlikely, and more so as the night she disappeared, Debbie had a friend over for dinner.
And that at some stage Debbie had run out of milk and had said that she was going down to the local shop to purchase milk. And she's left her baby with a family friend and had gone off to get the milk and hadn't been seen since. I'm thinking to myself, there's something wrong. There's got to be something wrong. There's no obvious reason for why this woman has gone missing.
Debbie's disappearance took on a more sinister tone, considering on the same night, only a train station away and less than 2 hours before, another woman had been assaulted.
As she approached the toilet block on the footpath, she noticed a male coming from the toilet block area. She didn't take a lot of notice of him. Shortly after that, she felt the person grab her from behind. And then he threatened her and suggested that he had a firearm or a pistol, which he'd put against her head. Rosa offered an expensive ring to the man and he didn't take it.
Finally, with a big push, broke free, ran out towards the road with him chasing her. Luckily for her, the car stopped.
While Rosa Toth escaped and was now safe at home, police were still searching for 22-year-old Debbie Freem.
Myself and one of my other colleagues had decided that because we knew Debbie had gone to get milk, we were going down to check the local milk bars, and we were travelling back to the office when I saw a silver car fitting the description of Debbie's in Madden Street, just outside the Christian Life Centre, I think it's called. There was a V-shaped dent in the bonnet which indicated that she may have been involved in an accident.
Police are also appealing to anyone who may have information about an accident involving Debbie's silver pulsar found 2 kilometres from home late yesterday.
According to Debbie's de facto, it didn't have that damage when he left it on Thursday.
We examined the car at that time and took photos of the car. The weather was closing in, so it was important to remove the car as quickly as possible. So we then took it to the Forensic Science Laboratory and put it undercover there for further examination. The damage to the front of the car extended from the top of the bonnet down through the grille to the number plate. This indicated to me that it had struck an upright object, possibly a street or road sign, a fence, something fairly tall.
To identify what Debbie's car hit and get a possible lead on where Debbie was, the number plate, which had tiny orange smears on it, was removed for testing.
I examined the substance using a very high-powered microscope to analyse the elemental composition. This was not paint or plastic or timber-based, but related somewhat possibly to a soil or to crushed rock or even brick.
It was more than likely that Debbie's car had hit a brick wall. But was it on her way to get the milk or after? No milk, no groceries, or her purse were found in the car. But other ominous clues were there.
When I examined the car, I noticed that the driver's seat was in a reclining position and pushed nearly all the way back. I gained the impression somebody larger than Debbie drove the car to Madden Street. I also found what appeared to be blood on a blade of grass sitting on the passenger side seat, and I found what appeared to be blood on the driver's seat.
The blood was that of Debbie Freem. But who had driven the car to Madden Street? Was the young mother missing or murdered?
Police have been sent to Carrum Downs, where a woman's body was found a short time ago. It was discovered in grazing land between Wedge Road and Thompson's Road.
Taylor's Road's an unmade road, and it's got grazing paddocks either side of the road, and the body was found between the trees and the wire fence of the paddock. It was suspected that it was the body of Debbie Freem, who had been missing for 2 or 3 days and whose car we had found in Madden Street in Frankston.
Residents in the Bayside suburbs of Seaford and Frankston are living in terror following the second stabbing murder in recent weeks. The body of Deborah Ann Freem was found beside a dirt road in farmland at Carrum Downs, 10 kilometres from her Seaford home.
Unfortunately, there was nothing at the scene to indicate who the offender might have been. We were still up in the air at that stage.
But while clues to the offender weren't present, he had left telltale signs that might link him to the murder of Elizabeth Stevens, whose body was found exactly 1 month before.
The body was covered by broken branches, and even though I didn't go to the scene of Elizabeth Stevens, I knew that her body had vegetation placed on top of it too. On the grass near where Debbie was concealed, there was a large amount of blood. This indicated to me that she was killed and then hidden behind the bushes. Her dress was pulled up around a midriff and her underclothing was intact, the same as Elizabeth Stevens.
She's died from multiple stab wounds, not only to the neck region, to the, as I said before, the upper body, in what can only be described as a frenzied attack.
When Debbie Freem's body was discovered and after the post-mortem examination, we're in a position to compare the sort of injuries and the post-mortem injuries from that victim against the first case. And what we did notice was that there was evidence of strangulation, there was a similar pattern of stab wounds, there were post-mortem injuries. So whilst there were a number of indicators that certainly led us to believe that there was a possibility it could be the same killer, we didn't want to give the impression that there was a serial killer on the run.
The problem facing the police was that 2 other young women had also been murdered in the area within the last 3 years.
The body of 25-year-old Michelle Brown was found in March last year, and Sarah McDermott was abducted from Cannock Railway Station in 1990. Her body was never found.
The connection to a serial killer was inevitable.
If there is a serial killer at work here, it's places like this where he stalks his prey. This area is full of young women and single mothers, people who used to feel safe here, but no longer.
My husband won't let me out after dark unless I've got one of the dogs with me.
Suburbia is not a safe place to live anymore.
I have to go with my husband, I don't feel safe with a girlfriend.
Your friend's up the road, but you're too scared to go and see them.
The bad guys are winning and that makes you angry.
I go to the nightclubs and that, and there aren't that many single girls going there now, because it's too dangerous for them to be out at night time.
Police are pouring resources into finding the murderer, who may well be a serial killer.
It was clear that a lot of people in Frankston were frightened, too frightened to go out at night.
We were all expecting another murder. You know, it was just this, whoever the killer was at this stage had developed an appetite for it. The most important thing was to try and catch the killer. You publicise the locations of caravans, as many photos of Elizabeth and Debbie, information about the car that she was driving, anything that might lead to the killer.
A number of people rang in as a result of police to the community from the media. Witnesses that came forward said that they'd seen a tall man return to the vehicle after it had been located in Madden Street and enter the vehicle and take some goods from it. Some of the other reports we got indicated that Debbie was seen in the vehicle with a male, that the vehicle was driving erratically through the streets of Frankston. There'd been some attempt to flash high beam, which gave the investigators our first clues that Debbie had in fact been abducted. We were confident that the offender had driven the vehicle back to Madden Street, and the main clue it gave us was we thought he lived within a walking vicinity of that area. And in order to flush out a potential offender or suspect, we called upon the services of our criminal profiler.
I was asked to have a look at the 2 murders that had occurred to that point to see if I could provide some insight in relation to the particular individual that might be involved in committing these murders. Typically, serial killers start their killing between the ages of 18 to 24. These kinds of individuals have a very rich fantasy life. They get pleasure out of fantasising about selecting their victims, the kind of victims and how they're going to kill them and what they're going to experience during the killing. So if you're fantasising almost every minute of your waking life, it's very difficult to hold down a meaningful job. There was enough information, enough evidence available to me to conclude the killer was a local You don't go and commit a murder in an area that you're totally uncomfortable with, because that would be your greatest exposure. So he would fit into the local community. He wouldn't attract attention. It was perfect for him.
From that information, the police produced a questionnaire and were going to target an area in Frankston where the profiler believed the killer might live. But just as they were about to commence the door knock, another young girl went missing. In less than 8 weeks, 2 young women had been killed, both in a similar and brutal way. There seemed little doubt that a serial killer was at work. The police had little to go on, but they had bombarded the area with extra officers, warning its residents to be careful, especially at night. And now, 17-year-old school student Natalie Russell was missing.
Normally Natalie rode her bike to school, and because it was raining, I said, you know, I'd take him. So I dropped her off at school, and I'd always said to Natalie, oh, ring me, you know, if you want to lift home. Anyway, there was no call, so I just presumed that she'd gone into Frankston, which she often did. And anyway, when the bus came, 6:15, Natalie wasn't on it. I was a bit concerned about that. The next bus came, a little after 7. And when she wasn't on that, I said, Brian, oh, something's wrong.
When I went to the house, I went inside and spoke to Mr. and Mrs. Russell. I remember Mrs. Russell was, she was very nervous. I remember she was wringing her hands a lot, she was. And I think she was thinking that something terrible might have happened. I think, as we all did on the night, we had a photo of the girl. We took a full description of what she was wearing, height, hair colour, length, and we immediately started asking questions about, you know, had they rung any of her friends, which they hadn't. No one had seen her since 2:30 when she had left school.
Across the road from Natalie's school was a bike track between 2 golf courses, a shortcut that many students, like Natalie, would take to get to their homes. It was the logical place to start their search.
We were taken to the spot where there was a large cut in the cyclone fence right up against one of the galvanised poles. The first thing I noticed was some bloody handprints along the pole, and as I walked into the bush and I saw a school bag, which all the kids from the college have, and then as I turned around the corner further, I saw a pair of black stockings and then the school uniform. One would assume straight away that it would be Natalie.
And I said, is it a female? And they said yes. And I said, school clothes on? They said yes. I said, John Paul College school clothes? They said, I said, well, it's not Natalie, because I said Natalie was too strong. She wouldn't let anyone hurt her or kill her.
I can say from looking at the scene what I saw, Natalie put up one hell of a fight. The ground was she'd kicked all the grass underneath was down to bare earth. She'd certainly struggled well, but unfortunately he just overpowered her.
The body of 17-year-old VCE student Natalie Russell was discovered at 11 o'clock last night, just over 2 hours after police launched an intensive search of the area when her family reported her missing. The killing follows the 2 earlier murders of Deborah Freem 3 weeks ago and Elizabeth Stevens on June the 12th. Detectives confirmed that she died from multiple stab wounds to the upper body. They are looking at the obvious similarities between the attacks.
The similarities with the other 2 victims were quite evident, but the striking difference in this particular scenario was that the offender had become more brazen, become more of a risk taker. Clearly hadn't decided to strike at night.
Just the way he'd cut a hole in the fence, and obviously it was someone just walking past, he would have just reached out and grabbed them and dragged them in, like, just, and a well-used track too. It was just a brazen act.
The following morning, forensic investigators searched the area where Natalie's body lay. They hoped that this crime scene, unlike the other 2, would provide evidence that would identify their killer.
We noticed the hole in the fence on the western side of the track had been cut, and further down the track there was another hole in the fence and also one on the eastern side. I collected samples of wire that had been cut from these holes. The cut wire was very significant because if we were able to find a tool, we could match that up to the cut wire at the scene. In the hole at the northern end of the track, there was an amount of blood smeared on a fence post. The blood may have belonged to the offender, but it could also have come from Natalie as well. In behind this hole, there was a bushy area where the body of the deceased was laying. And up near her head were a couple of small leather straps, very, very light type leather, similar to straps that are used on binoculars. These were stained with blood, and if they had have been used for the purpose of strangulation, they would have broken as they appear to have done.
The autopsy was also showing positive leads.
Within the largest of the neck injuries, a 2.7 by 0.5 centimetre piece of skin was discovered. This skin, when examined, had ridges on it, suggesting that it had come from the hand. And there were no equivalent injuries present on Natalie Russell.
That piece of skin was going to hold a vital clue for the investigators, because what it was able to do was provide a DNA match between the offender and the crime scene, a nexus between Natalie and whoever killed her.
SES workers and police continue the search for clues today. Dozens of golfers were turned away as police closed the courses and sealed off an area covering more than 3 square kilometres.
We're certainly interested in hearing from anybody who may have seen a person, or male person in particular, loitering around the golf course.
That plea would be answered by a young cop fresh out of the academy. His notebook would hold the missing piece of the puzzle the detectives so desperately needed. The small community of Frankston, only an hour away from Melbourne, was the target of a serial killer.
It was up to us to deliver that killer so that people can get on with their lives.
The criminal profiler suggested the murderer was 18 to 24, unemployed and a local. Police were now door-knocking a particular area in which they believed the killer lived.
More than 150 detectives from almost every Victorian police squad joined forces in Bayside Frankston today to begin Operation Pulsar.
As the door knock began, Detective Wilson learned of a potential and exciting lead.
2 young constables came to the task force office reporting an incident they'd been called to the previous day, the day that Natalie Russell went missing.
We received a call to attend Sky Road in Frankston for a suspicious vehicle, and when we got there we saw a Toyota Corona, a yellow kind of car.
It was parked opposite the bike track that Natalie and her schoolmates used and had been reported to the police by a postie.
On Friday, around about 3 o'clock, I was on my round, just about finished. It was knock-off time for school, and I saw a car without any registration plates on the back. There was a bloke in the car with his arms crossed, and he slouched down to try and hide, under the steering wheel. And I just kept going till I found a house that I knew someone was home, so I went in there, called the police.
When we got there was no one at the car, it had no registration plates, and we noticed a interim registration label on the front windscreen. I noted the registration down, and then we decided to have a look around at some of the houses that were on the same side of the street as the car. So we did a bit of a door knock, had a bit of a look across the road. There was no one around, so we just made sure that we had all the details right from the car, and then we left.
The following day, they brought that information to our attention, and that was a significant breakthrough. I felt quite optimistic about 2 main issues here. This person was right at the scene when the killing occurred, so we either had potentially a first-grade witness, or we were for the first time in this investigation, we had a real suspect we could look at.
The car was registered to a Paul Charles Denyer, and his flat was smack in the middle of the area police and their profiler had targeted.
We knocked at the door and Paul invited us into his flat. He was quite relaxed. He was extremely friendly. eager to answer our questions, very, very cooperative. I noticed that he had a number of cuts on his fingers, and I invited Paul to come back to the police station at Frankston.
Before continuing, I must inform you that you're not obliged to say or do anything, but anything you say or do may be given in evidence. Do you understand that?
Yeah.
What is your age and date of birth?
I'm 21 years old. I was born on the 14th of April 1972.
Okay. Are you an Australian citizen?
Yep.
Are you currently employed?
No, I'm unemployed at the present time.
All we'd like to do, Paul, is if you could just run through, starting with yesterday morning.
I got up in the morning about 20 to 8, 7:30, 20 to 8.
Right.
Sharon was running.
During the questioning with Paul Denyer, Paul was consistent with his the way he'd answered questions back at his flat.
As I was coming down, say past Kringle Drive, I noticed temperature gauge started to go right up to high. So I just pulled over in Sky Road.
Yeah.
And right across the road is, you know, your golf course and everything. So I pulled up there and I checked under the car, under the bonnet, and found out the hose had come loose.
When we saw you down at your flat this afternoon, I noticed a number of cuts on your fingers.
Yeah.
Can you just put your hands flat on the desk here, so that just right up here. This injury here is a long sort of a cut. Just explain how you got that injury and when you got that injury.
I got it yesterday when I was working on the car.
How are you saying it occurred?
Well, the fan spins this way, so if I'm standing at the front of the car, like here, fan spins that way, the alternator sits there, and there's some wires running down underneath the bottom of the radiator. There's a wire at the top, which was for a light that I just recently put on. And it must have been when I was putting my hand down there, I caught the fan.
Why did you have it running at that stage when you were checking the radiator?
Clumsy worker on cars.
As Paul Denyer willingly recounted his day's events, his flat was being searched.
I then went to his flat and was part of the search party in executing a warrant, and the things we then found there.
At the flat, the team collected knives and various pieces of clothing, and from the car, binoculars without a strap. And amongst his many and varied tools, a pair of pliers.
Just build up our excitement in relation to say, well, we're confident it wasn't another one that I mentioned earlier, the chap that we found, that slammed the door in our face. I think we're onto the right guy here.
To know that, those pliers were taken to the forensic laboratory where they were used to cut sample pieces of wire. Every pair of pliers has its own individual and distinctive cutting edge, just like every person has an individual fingerprint. Any wears or imperfections on the blade are reflected on the ends of the wire it cuts. So when these sample wires were examined under a microscope against the cut wire brought back from the bike track, they matched.
Are you aware that a girl was found murdered in Frankston?
Yeah.
Today being Saturday?
Yeah.
When did you first become aware of that?
Well, I saw some police cars and everything when I was driving up Sky Road this morning, and SES workers.
So you saw SES workers and all that in Sky Road?
Yeah. And they had some white tape across the walkway. And I saw you.
Sorry, you saw me?
Yeah, I saw you, and I saw the other guy.
And that was, what were you doing when you saw that? Where were you going, or what were you doing?
Oh, we were going to the wreckers.
He seemed to be able to have an answer for every occasion, where he was, what he did, which certainly gave rise to suspicion because nobody has that sort of recall, in my view.
Yeah.
More disturbingly, Paul Denyer could recall every minute of every hour on the very days that Elizabeth, Debbie and Natalie were murdered.
Yesterday, your car was parked opposite the location where the body of Natalie Russell was found. On the night that Debbie Freem disappeared, you walked over to Kennedall Railway Station, missed the train and walked back. And on the night Elizabeth Stevens disappeared, you walked in a very close proximity to Lloyd Park on your way to pick up this battery. Do you think that's fairly coincidental
it is.
in all the circumstances?
Yeah.
Are you responsible for the deaths of any of these women?
No.
Police were continuing to interview their prime suspect, Paul Charles Denyer. Not only was his car in close proximity to the murder scene of Natalie Russell, but his flat contained evidence that linked him to that scene. His hands also had suspicious cuts.
A sample of your blood is requested for the purpose of confirming or disproving your involvement in these matters.
We asked Paul for a blood sample and a sample of other tissue so we could establish a match between skin found at the post-mortem of the Russell victim and himself, so we could tie him to the murder.
All right, we're just going to suspend the interview for a short time. Is there anything else you want, like a cup of coffee or a glass of water?
Yeah, I would like another cup of coffee. Yeah.
How do you have your coffee?
White for two.
All right, I'll get you a cup of coffee, all right? Just have a short break.
At that particular time when he was sitting there, he was starting to realise now that blood samples were being requested and the DNA may link him to the scenes, and he knew that we didn't believe any of his story.
Do you think that's fairly coincidental?
Yeah, it is.
In all the circumstances?
Yeah.
I think he knew that the game was up, so to speak, and whilst we're waiting for our forensic experts to come and take various samples, Detective Darren O'Loughlin was looking after Paul, and Darren was wearing a cross that you could see through his shirt, and Paul asked him if he was a Christian, and conversation ensued about that.
You spoke to Detective O'Loughlin here, and you told Detective O'Loughlin that you were responsible for the murders of the three women. Is that correct? Just tell us in your own words, Paul, what happened in relation to the death of Elizabeth Stevens at Langwarrin.
I saw her get off the bus. I walked up behind her, stuck my left hand around her, ran her mouth like this and held a gun to her head right here. I started choking her with my hands, and she passed out after a while. And then I pulled out the knife.
Okay.
And I dragged her to where she was found. Then I threw 2 branches on her body.
Can you tell me why you attacked her on that night?
Just had the feeling, that's all.
What sort of feeling? Can you possibly describe it, where you had this feeling?
Just wanted to kill.
Once he'd made the decision to admit the offence, he didn't hold back anything. You could see that he was very willing to recount everything that had occurred.
Yeah. Okay, can you tell us what happened here?
Well, the car was sitting over there.
This is Debbie Freem's car we're talking about.
Yeah, Pulsar.
Right.
I was walking down this road here.
Right.
Saw her jump out of the car.
Yes.
Ran into the milk bar here. So I jumped in the back seat of the car.
Right.
And the car was directly across the road, so I could see her from inside the car in there.
What caused you to select her at that time?
Just that go feeling.
Right. So what happened then?
And then she came out. While I was crouched down, I could hear her footsteps coming closer to the car.
Mm-hmm.
And she hopped in the car, but she didn't see me in the back. And she went to do a U-turn, pulled out the gun that I had, just as she was doing that turn. She kept going straight into this wall.
What did you hit?
It could be there. Which caused a dent on the bonnet.
Right.
And then you drove off down this Cannock Avenue?
Yeah, down that way.
He was totally removed from the circumstances of what occurred. It's like it didn't happen for him. He was explaining it outside himself.
He then took Debbie to Taylor's Road. where he strangled and then killed her with a knife, like he did with Elizabeth Stevens.
I dragged her about a metre into the trees and where she was lying against the fence. And I broke off 2 branches off the nearest tree and threw them over her body. And I hopped back in the car again and I adjusted the seat to match my height because she was a lot smaller than me. And headed back to Madden Street.
Why to Madden Street?
Wasn't too close, wasn't too far from home.
The next morning, just as witnesses described, Paul Denyer went back to Debbie's car and grabbed her groceries and purse.
I wanted to see what her name was and everything out of her wallet, so...
Right.
I took it up to the golf course and buried it.
So you'll be able to show us where that is?
Exactly.
And how would you be able to find the spot?
All right, I'll find it.
You've brought us up the track to this point where you've just kindly cut the fence open for us.
Yep.
This is the area in here where you've indicated the purse is.
Yes.
He's digging around and, you know, like, really, we could have just said, relax, Paul. It'll be here. If you say it's here, it'll be here, you know. But he was frantically digging because it was like we weren't going to believe him.
I should have a shovel.
Just hold it there. Just shake a bit of the mud off if you can, mate. So that's the location where you buried the purse?
Yep.
And who does that purse belong to?
Debbie Frame.
I'll put it in the bag.
3 weeks later, he returned to the track.
Yep.
What can you tell me about this?
I went up there earlier that day and cut the holes in the fences.
What did you use to cut the holes in the fences?
Pair of pliers. I stood here and watched Natalie Russell walk around the corner. And then I went through this hole and waited behind the trees there.
Right.
Until I saw her walk past here and heading that way.
Right.
And when she got about 10 metres down the track here, I came out of the fence.
As we're walking along here, are you still maintaining that distance behind her?
No, I was getting closer each time. I walked along the grass like this and make a sound.
So you wouldn't be heard?
Yeah. I was armed with a red-handled knife.
Where'd that come from?
From my place.
Is that all you had?
Yeah.
Just a red-handled knife?
Oh, and a leather strap. You would have found it at the scene, in 2 pieces.
What was that used for?
Strangling.
What was that from?
There was a strap off a pair of binoculars I had at home. I grabbed her here around the mouth, in the left hand, like this.
Yeah.
I dragged her through here.
Absolutely no remorse for what he did. The candour of his confessions were chilling, and the way he was able to describe what he'd done to these poor victims without any sort of emotion, it was quite an amazing journey.
What did you want to kill her for?
Same reason as before. No, I've always wanted to kill.
Since when?
Since I was about 14.
Apart from his callous descriptions of the 3 murders, he also admitted to assaulting Rosa Toth on the same night as he killed Debbie Freem.
This is some weeks after Elizabeth Stevens.
Yeah, I was just, like every day, I was just going up, boiling up, till I got to that stage.
Were you armed with the same weapon?
Exactly the same.
Exactly the same weapon?
Was that the weapon you used when you first approached Elizabeth Stevens?
Yeah, that's the one.
And the same with Deborah Freem?
Yep.
Same as the woman at Seaford Railway Station?
Yep.
If that lady hadn't have got away, what would have happened to her?
I would have killed her.
Rosa wasn't the only lucky one.
I've been stalking women for a few years.
Right.
In Frankston. Just waiting for that opportunity.
Right.
Waiting for the sign.
Right.
Paul Denyer's confession had lasted just over 5 hours.
21-year-old unemployed man Paul Charles Denyer was charged at the Frankston police station at 9 o'clock this morning. The station was under tight security as Denyer was driven away in a divisional van escorted by a second police car.
When I went back up to the task force room, I can assure you there was absolute elation. There was cheering and, you know, quite a lot of, you know, positive comments being made.
And I suppose, given all the time we'd put in, the victims that I'd seen, the elation was just so great. We all went back to, in the early hours of the morning, to a hotel, had a couple of beers in the wee hours of the morning and went home.
And then when it was over, he stood up and he walked all along and he spotted me and he just stood there and stared at me and said, "I'm sorry." And I thought, well, you can lie to me, but you can't lie to God.
Right now, Paul Denyer is behind those high walls under maximum security, serving a minimum sentence of 30 years. So, having murdered 3 young women and abducting another, Denyer could be out on the streets at the age of 51.
That was just a real kick in the teeth as far as we were concerned. That he could do that to these young women and the law would basically give him a lousy 30 years for 3 murders.
Because how many times has it happened? They get out, they'll do it again. There's just no way that he won't do it again.
That's what he is. He's just a murderer.